We are live. This is Fantasy Football Today, DFS, and we've got a special show for a special Thanksgiving Day tomorrow. I've got Meg Schaub, Mike McClure alongside. Meg, how you doing today? I love these 3-game slates.
Yeah, we love our short slates. I love Thanksgiving. The older I get, the more Thanksgiving becomes my favorite holiday. I just absolutely love the Thanksgiving holiday. This Thanksgiving slate is amazing. I'm thankful for you guys and to be on the show with you guys. So I'm excited. I'm ready to talk about it.
Mike, I want to get your initial thoughts on this slate. I also want to remind everybody, if you didn't see our tweets yesterday, we've got our contest. Thanksgiving, we'll have a main slate contest too, but we've got a Thanksgiving contest. I only made it 150 deep, so try to get in there because I knew it was going to be short notice for people. It's in the YouTube description. It's going to be in the podcast description for this show. Shout out to last week's top 5, Liddy. A big fan of this show, but a big fan of the Early Edge, always in the Early Edge chat. Liddy took it down at Liddy SMS. SH13 came in second place. Rye L. Petty, Jess Nicky, and Just Lamar rounded out the top 5. So congratulations to you 5. Of course, the top 15 get paid out, but I wanted to give a top 5 shout out there. Mike, I want to get right into this show, and we're just going to go game by game and talk about the type of lineups we want to make, maybe talk a little bit about late swap and some of the interesting things you can do on a 3-game slate. But forget about that right now. From a pricing standpoint, when you looked at this slate, what did you think?
I thought it was a little soft. You know, they have to make it soft to be able to get, these guys in there. I mean, the thing that's crazy about this slate overall is you essentially have 3 of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL in terms of like DFS pricing on a full slate on a 3-game slate. And that number could go even higher if Joe Burrow were healthy, right? So just the number of great quarterbacks and expensive quarterbacks here, it's truly an awesome slate from that standpoint. But I would say the pricing is a little soft. And what I mean by that is I can grab the most expensive quarterback, the 2 most expensive running backs, and 2 wide receivers at $7K or above and still build a lineup here. So it's a little disappointing in that, but also creates a lot of interesting tournament angles, particularly if you're playing in that $5 millionaire contest that's $1 million to first. You're going to be able to get some very interesting lineup builds here because you can, again, play whoever you want, leave a lot of salary. It's going to be a fun slate.
Meg, it's true that you can play whoever you want to a degree, but I mean, there are so many superstars on this slate that it's not like you can play Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and CeeDee Lamb or George. You can't necessarily play them on a lineup. So in the first lineups that you've tried to make here, you've had to make some calls here. Like, obviously you want to assign yourself to a game or two or a team or two and just kind of go in on those games. But there had to have been some guys you really wanted to play that were on the outside looking in.
Of course. Yeah, no, like you said, I agree with Mike, the pricing soft, but there still are going to be decision points between those very high priced guys and where you want to land. And what I'll likely do is kind of like we talk about for Showdown, the shorter the slate, the more you want to tell a story. So I might lean more into, okay, this lineup is, I think the Bengals-Ravens game goes off. This lineup is more the Chiefs-Cowboys goes off. And not that you still can't, put in a skinny stack or something like that, or a high price guy from another game, but I might kind of tell stories like that. And then if one game does go off and go way above its total, then I'm kind of playing it that way.
Okay, well, let's get into the first game here. It's the Packers. It's the Lions. Mike, I'll start with you here. I just want to kind of get into where you think you're leaning from, whether you're stacking anybody in this game or whether you're just kind of said, I'm in on this guy, or I've got to be out on this guy. Because I look at the Lions side, and Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously the most expensive running back for good reason at 8,800 on DraftKings. Hard to get away from that, right? Especially when you look at the running backs on the slate. I feel like I want to find a reason to fade Gibbs, but I haven't found that reason because the other running backs I'm just not super fond of. You find yourself getting to Gibbs, and what else are you getting to in this game?
Yeah, definitely going to be getting to Gibbs. Now, I think there will be a strong case to be made to build a lineup that fades him, because at his price, he will need quite a bit to pay it off. But yeah, certainly in like a cash game type lineup, my core lineups, he will be right there. Other players in the game, like you can play Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to be pretty contrarian in the sense that which is as contrarian as you can get on a 3-game slate, right? So when I say contrarian, if he comes in at 25%, that's pretty low owned when you're talking about only 3 games and still filling out a full roster that requires you to have all the wide receivers and a flex like that. That's a low number on an ownership number. So condition yourself. This is nowhere near a 10-game slate. But I think he'll go under owned relative to guys like Pickens and Lamb, just from a price point standpoint. And then we'll see where he comes in relative to Jamar Chase and a guy like Rashee Rice. But I think that Amon-Ra, you'll be able to catch some decent ownership on. David Montgomery is always interesting at 4,800. Just a cheap running back if you want to load up at those wide receiver positions. As far as the Green Bay side, that's where I think you can get super, super interesting. I think there's going to be very little ownership on the Green Bay wide receivers. So I'd be looking at guys like Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and that's probably it at this point. But I do think that there's an interesting case to be made for the Packers pass catchers without Jordan Love as a handcuff.
Meg, I agree with pretty much everything Mike just said there. I wonder how much room there is, because you look at Romeo Doubs, I think people are going to want to play Christian Watson because they like the explosiveness that he offers. And we talk about the Detroit Lions defense. It's a very aggressive defense. I don't know how this game is going to go. I don't know where I lean with respect to the total or the team totals, but Christian Watson's the guy that could like blow up a slate because he could have four catches, but 2 of them could be for, 40 plus and a touchdown. So he's the guy that I would lean to on that side. I'll note that if you wanted to go super cheap at tight end, it does look like John Fitzpatrick might be getting more work than Luke Musgrave. But again, I don't know that I want to go to him or Brock Wright. Are you jamming in Gibbs? Are you considering a stack in either of these games, whether it's with Goff or Jordan Love, and who else do you like?
Well, first of all, of course, I love Gibbs and I'm going to play Gibbs, but I would say in the lineups that I don't play Gibbs, I want to tell that story of why he doesn't hit the lineup. I'm either playing Montgomery or I'm playing Goff and a double stack, right? Because those are the ways why Gibbs doesn't work in this game. I don't think Lions are going to get shut out at home. No, they weren't as impressive as I personally thought they were going to be against the Giants last week. But at home, I still think we're going to see points here from the Lions side. So again, it's going to be the lineups that I don't play Gibbs. It's going to tell a story why, and it will have other Lions pieces in it.
Okay, talk to me about the Packers side of things, like Josh Jacobs, Emmanuel Wilson. Josh Jacobs is going to play. He's certainly trending to play, and I think he's even said he's going to play. But are we playing him at 6,800? Because he's definitely on the outside looking in terms of what we're saying. We're probably going to jam in Jahmyr Gibbs. I think people are going to want to play maybe some Javonte or some Derrick Henry, maybe take a shot at a low-end running back, maybe with the Chiefs. I feel like people just, because of the uncertainty of Josh Jacobs in terms of his injury, they're just going to stay away from him. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm seeing it around like 23% owned right now. So it's not like it's like some massive contrarian play, but to Mike's point, like on a 3-game slate, that is lower. I'm struggling with that one because, you're going to get a little ownership discount. So he's definitely in my pool, but I think he's probably 4th of the running backs. And there is just some positional scarcity, as you mentioned, at the running back position on this slate. So for me, first and foremost, I think it's only going to be a 2 running back build for me, whether it's 4 receivers or 2 tight ends, most likely. And then, I may sprinkle in some Jacobs, but I don't know how much I'll get to Jacobs, just because I could see a world where they just play it conservatively, still let Wilson get some run. So I think I'm going to have some Jacobs, but not probably a little less than the field.
Mike, I think a lot of people from a stacking standpoint are probably not getting to this game as much as the next game we're going to talk about, the Chiefs and the Cowboys. I feel like the Mahomes stacks and the Dak Prescott stacks are going to be the most popular. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But are you getting, if you were going to, like you talked about the $5 150 max, and I know you do typically do the 5 big lineups, would you be getting, let's say you were only doing 5 lineups, would you be getting to a Goff or Jordan Love stack? And if so, what does that stack look like?
So if I were, it would probably be Jordan Love more than Goff. And why that might be is it might be the scenario where the Lions get there and some of it could be rushing rather than receiving and passing. And then there's just the scenario of catching up, but it also comes down to price points. Jordan Love, a pretty significant discount at 5,500 relative to some of the other guys on here. And out of all, like the way the game could play out here, I could see Green Bay being in the more obvious passing situations for a larger portion of the game. So what a Love lineup for me would probably look like would be a double. Like my favorite Love lineup that I've got pulled up here would be Jordan Love. It's got Gibbs. It's got Derrick Henry. You've got the two receivers in Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. You've got Amon-Ra St. Brown as the next wide receiver. That would be a build that I would start with if it was a Jordan Love lineup. I can't imagine a Love lineup that didn't have at least one of Doubs or Watson, but likely both of them.
Okay. And I mean, just to be clear here, when you look at the implied totals, 23 for the Packers, 25 to 26 for the Cowboys. And just to compare that to that Cowboys Chiefs game, Cowboys implied totals 24.5, Chiefs implied total is 28. So certainly the Chiefs have the highest implied total because I'm looking at the Ravens. Actually, that's not true. The Ravens are 29 and basically flat 29 to 29.5. So interesting notes there in terms of the implied totals. Meg, are you getting to any Goff or Jordan Love stacks before we move on?
Yeah, I do have some interest because not that we have some Thanksgiving slates where there's Uber Chuck at quarterback and then, really, really, really low. And this one is a little flatter, but Goff and Love are considerably lower than the other quarterbacks on the slate or are the two lowest. So I do have some interest there. I loved the Love stack that Mike mentioned. And then, obviously for Goff, you could do Goff with a Jahmyr Gibbs and a receiver, or just a Goff double stack and fade the running backs and approach it that way. So I kind of like those different approaches. And I especially think a Goff double stack that fades Gibbs would be fairly contrarian overall too.
What's interesting is that Goff was really flat against against the Giants last week. But remember what my stack was? It was Goff to Gibbs. So even if you threw in Jamison Williams to that lineup who put up 0, like you were at least going to cash because you had, even though Gibbs was popular, you were still going to cash unless everybody else in your lineup was just terrible. So I ended up cashing like pretty well. I didn't make too much money because Goff was my quarterback and because of a couple of other slip ups, but I don't mind going back to a Goff Gibbs stack and maybe trying to get lucky with Jamison Williams, who's going to give you that price break. And in that case, maybe I run it back with somebody like Christian Watson. Maybe I just go to the next game. And that's what we're going to do next. We're going to go to the next game. If you have questions, you can put some questions on Twitter. If there's a lot of people watching us on Twitter, feel free to get some questions out there that'll show up in our chat, but also just come over to the Fantasy Football Today YouTube channel and get your questions in there. We're going to try to move fast, even faster than we did through that Green Bay Detroit Lions game. We're going to cover the next two right after this message from our partners.
Well, you need your sports news anywhere?
We've got breaking news to bring you.
Then get your sports anytime you want them. Big trade news overnight to discuss.
Because we know you need sports all the time.
A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
A legend adds to their legacy.
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
CBS Sports HQ, anywhere, anytime, all the time.
We're back on Fantasy Football Today. DFS. Mike, it's your Chiefs at Dallas, 52.5 point total. I think this was 51.5. And I remember you saying you liked the over in this game when we did our Monday early edge show on CBS Sports Network. Might even trend up to 53.5. I thought that's what you said, or at least implied, like it could even go like higher than 52.5. With all that said, I got to think that at least a couple of your stacks, if you're making the 5 lineups, would be Patrick Mahomes related. But talk to me about what you like, what stack you like better, Dak or Patrick Mahomes?
I like them both. I'll be playing them both. I'm going to lean more on the Mahomes side only because of the rushing. I think that he will still run in this game. And I think there's a scenario, one that I'm frankly building for, where Dak throws multiple touchdowns in this game, but Patrick Mahomes throws and or potentially runs for one as well. So I'll be having CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens both in lineups with Patrick Mahomes. And just banking on that scenario that Mahomes rushing can do just enough to edge out Dak Prescott. But I'll essentially have identical lineups where it's Dak Prescott with his 2 guys and then swapping out Dak for Patrick Mahomes in that particular spot. I'll find the extra $200 for it. That's ultimately what can decide a tournament like this is, one quarterback outscoring the other by half a point essentially. But the priority here for me, CeeDee Lamb, priority number one. We've watched George Pickens, really almost become wide receiver one. Some of that is true. Like he's played really well, but CeeDee Lamb is still getting targets. He's just been dropping the football and hasn't been nearly as efficient. He had more targets than George Pickens in the last game. Now they had 20 targets combined. It's pretty equal. So I'm projecting double digits again for both of them. I think they're both too cheap. So I like both of them. Lamb in first, then Pickens. Love both quarterbacks. I love Xavier Worthy. I love Travis Kelce in this game. I like Flanoy if you need a very cheap wide receiver. He's someone that I would consider. I think that some lineups, I mentioned how soft the pricing is where you're getting, again, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, Patrick Mahomes, like Travis Kelce, all these guys in the same lineup. In order to do that, you do have to play 3K receiver at some point. I think that some of the field will take shot on DeAndre Hopkins at 3,300 just because of the touchdown equity and the threat that he represents there. Flanoy would be the guy for me at that price point.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention them all now, but I do think there's a lot of like low end options at the tight end and the wide receiver position that people are going to take a shot on. I mean, we can talk about later in the show, guys like Yoshivas, or even putting somebody like Isaiah Likely, Mike Gesicki in that tight end or flex position, depending on how you're playing other tight ends. Meg, I built a lineup before the show. It was really just a placeholder. I was just experimenting really. And it had Dak with George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. And I actually kind of loved the lineup. I can't remember right now who I ran it back with. I'm not looking at it right now, but I love how just the targets are pretty concentrated. Obviously there's other guys that get involved. We can talk about Flournoy or Jake Ferguson, but I like that type of stack. But then again, I also like the Patrick Mahomes stack. Maybe with I don't want to say a cheap Travis Kelce, but I mean, Mahomes Kelce stack makes sense to me. Obviously, Rashee Rice, a little expensive considering the other receivers on the slate. Do you like either of these stacks?
Yeah, I like both of these stacks. I agree with Mike. I think this game goes over. I mean, again, we have such an amazing Thanksgiving slate, but I think a lot of people are very, very excited for this game for both real life implications and fantasy, and the fantasy goodness of it all. So I like both quarterback stacks. I really do like the Dak double stack. I also don't mind mixing in Ferguson to that when I do either in a run back to Mahomes or in a Dak stack. And the reason why is, of all the players that seem contrarian, and I'm talking like under 12% contrarian, he's like the only player that I think is like actually a good player and actually gets, good red zone usage and everything. So Jake Ferguson, I'm seeing like 8 or 9% owned. Now, what does that end up being on Thursday when it locks? Maybe it's not that low owned, but to me, that's an interesting way to approach a DAX stack, is adding Ferguson in and hoping his red zone usage continues. If he gets 2 touchdowns, then that could be a massive leverage pull. So I do like that, but definitely love both quarterback stacks.
Mike, do you find yourself getting to Travis Kelce? And I'd like you to comment on ownership as it relates to like Javonte Williams, who I'm not super intrigued to play given this matchup, but also because I just want to go somewhere else. But again, this Kansas City Chiefs defense, I respect all around, but certainly I respect their rush defense. Are you getting to Javonte? Is he super popular? Are you getting to Travis Kelce? And then we can address the Kansas City running back situation.
I will possibly get to Javonte. I think that there's, as far as where the field goes, I think he's going to get a lot of ownership, but mostly price point wise. At 6,300, he's the guy that you can get that's got true touchdown equity, that gives you exposure to this great game. And why I think he'll ultimately be popular is we're talking about this game. Like I can hear it in my voice. I can hear it in all of our voices. Essentially, these games are all within, 3 points of each other on a total, essentially. Right. And all above 47, like they're all 49 and like they're all great games independently. But this one at 52.5, we talk about it as if we're talking about this game compared to like a 41.5 point total, essentially. And it's just so attractive. So I think that there's a good portion of the field with only 3 games that's going to, be quote unquote contrarian, play the other side. The one way to get contrarian here is to play the running game and not the passing game. We talk about that a lot. So because of that, and because of when you're seeing stacks on the other games, it's just a natural fit at 6,300 to save that money. So I think that Javonte is going to be extremely popular. I'm going to come in under the field, but I'm not going to full fade. I'm going to be about half of what I think the field is. But I think everyone in this game is going to be owned. And I think it's annoying to say, but everyone in this game is a great play. Like, it's a dome, it's a controlled environment. It's two of the, I think it's offense number 1 and 2 in the NFL right now. Currently, they're statistically both top 5 in EPA per play. I think in their current form in these particular matchups, they will look like number 1 and number 2 in the NFL offensively.
Mike, real quick on Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco. Brashard Smith obviously got some work last week, but that was without Pacheco. Looks like Pacheco is back. Are you just avoiding this backfield? I mean, they're all pretty cheap. That's why I'm asking.
I'm avoiding Isaiah Pacheco for sure at 5K. I don't think they rush him back in. He had already lost goal line work to Kareem Hunt to begin with. So if I were playing one of the two, it would be Kareem Hunt. And I probably will still have a little exposure to Kareem Hunt.
Meg, do you find yourself getting to Patrick Mahomes stacks? And if so, who are you actually stacking him with?
With Mahomes, I think the priority would be Rice, Kelsey, but I do think Worthy, obviously you could mix that in if you wanted to, like you said, bump down from Rice. But I think in Mahomes lineups, I would want to stack him with his kind of primary 2 receivers in Rice and Kelsey in that regard. And I'm just very happy you asked our resident Kansas City Chiefs fan, because I did not know how to handle the Hunt and Pacheco situation. And that was like stressing me out. I'm the same way as when I do play a Kansas City running back, I was leaning towards Hunt, but I wanted to hear what Mike had to say. So I'm very glad you asked him that.
Yeah, Mike, I feel like that's the guy. Like, again, the running back situation is I don't want to say it's interesting, but it's almost like boring, because people are going to want to jam in Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, you can find a reason to fade him, just like Meg said, and have a different script where David Montgomery's running between the tackles and that he's getting 1 or 2 touchdowns there against a formidable Packers defense. But I feel like Kareem Hunt, if you were going to like play Gibbs and you wanted to fade, let's say Derrick Henry and Javonte Williams. I mean, you could play Chase Brown. We'll talk about that, but Samaje Perine is back. I feel like Kareem Hunt would be that cheaper option that you could play if you wanted to fade one of those top 3 running backs. Mike, do you agree? Would that be like maybe the 4th guy in line that you would play? Or would Chase Brown at, I think, 6,200 be that guy?
I think Chase Brown probably still is. The thing I also want to caution with on Hunt, like the workload's certainly not going to be where it was, right? And his workload was ridiculous against the Indianapolis Colts. He rushed the ball 30 times. He touched the ball 33 times that counted, right? Not counting penalties, things like that. He had a massive workload. It's a short week with travel down to Dallas now. It's Pacheco's going to take some of that work. We'll see how involved he is. I do expect him to still have some of the high value touches potentially in the red zone, but I think there's a scenario here where Kareem Hunt could go all the way back to like 6 touches in this game, 8 touches in this game, which would terrify me. So and he may still have 14, 15. Like, I think it's truly unknown. Again, the beauty of it is if he does touch it, it's likely to be in the end zone. But I tell you where I would probably speculate more than anything.
Brashard Smith?
No.
Okay.
David Montgomery is where I would go. Talking about like the next down. I would be off of the Kansas City running game more than anything. I just think that all 3 of them can have touches. And I think the way to beat Dallas is still throwing the football.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I said Brashard Smith. I'm thinking of a game script where Cowboys just jump all over him. You play your DAC stack and you get lucky because Brashard Smith, who's gotten more receiving work, been on the field a little bit more. That's without Pacheco, of course, but he's a different runner than Pacheco. They use him differently. So I could just see him gobbling up some catches. He certainly has the speed and skill to maybe get there for you at 4,200 if you wanted to do something super contrarian. All right, let's get to the Bengals and the Ravens. Meg, I'm going to start with you here. Another high total, 51.5 point total. This one is a bit of a larger spread. Ravens favored by 7 here. Meg, Lamar Jackson hasn't looked very good. So I suspect not a lot of people are playing him, but this is the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Joe Burrow is going to be back. Derrick Henry is 7,300. I suspect he's going to be pretty popular almost by default because of what the running back position has to offer on the Thanksgiving slate. Zay Flowers, 6,100. I think the tight ends are interesting. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, 3,600, 2,600. And then I did mention Chase Brown on the other side. I said he was 6,200. He's actually 6,500. Are you getting to this Ravens side at all, Meg? And then we'll get to the Bengals.
So this is terrifying, but because of the way Lamar Jackson has looked, I am probably not going to play him as much. I am going to lean into the Burrow stack side of this and the Henry running game side of this. You can run all over the Bengals and you want to target tight ends against the Bengals. We saw that get home last week with Hunter Henry. I bet both his touchdown and his over yardage, and that was a fun one to hit. So that's kind of been a funnel all season. So of course, I like Mark Andrews and Derrick Henry the best. Now that is chalky likely if you want to get a little more contrarian, but he's not coming in super contrarian. So you could, pivot from Andrews to Likely, certainly. But I'm leaning into the Derrick Henry side here. We always talk about Derrick Henry heats up as the weather gets colder. And we've kind of seen that come to fruition. He had 2 touchdowns last week. So I just like this spot for Henry, and I'm going to make a massive stand there and be lower on Lamar Jackson, knowing very well that could burn me. If, there's certainly a world where Lamar can have a 4 touchdown game or run one in and throw for 3. So that's kind of how I'm playing it. And I really like the passing game side from the Bengals.
Mike, it does feel like it's a pretty obvious Derrick Henry game. And so I like him too. I don't know what's going on with Lamar. Like, clearly to me, he's protecting himself from running, and he's a little banged up maybe in multiple places here. But maybe that's a reason to speculate on Lamar Jackson. If nobody really is super interested in playing him, I still do like Derrick Henry. I'll be playing a decent amount of Derrick Henry. What do you like on that Baltimore side before we get to Cincinnati?
It sounds annoying, but I like a lot of it. I like Derrick Henry. Some of it is necessity. You've got to play 2 running backs. I think the price point is appropriate for the matchup. I think there's a scenario kind of like last week. He finds the end zone twice. I think the only difference here is we're probably talking about 100+ yards rushing as well. So I like Derrick Henry here. I like Lamar still, and I know that he's expensive. He's not doing it with his legs. I've docked him a little bit in my projection because of the rushing. I still think he could get there by, throwing. I think that he's got options. I like both of the tight ends being so cheap, right? So I'm not going to play Zay Flowers at 6,100. When Lamar really gets there, I think he's kind of spread the ball out, and sometimes that involves the tight ends. So it'll be like I could see a scenario where you're playing Andrews, Likely, and Lamar. I could see the absolute route scenario where you're playing Lamar, Henry, and one of the tight ends as well. Where it's like, if I told you that the Baltimore Ravens scored 41 points against Cincy, like, I don't think that would be terribly shocking, right? It's a home game against this defense, against potentially a rusty Joe Burrow, gives them some short fields early. That to me is a scenario that's absolutely in play here. So I will certainly have a build that focuses on Baltimore, drastically outperforming their team total.
Mike, when you talk about spreading the ball out with Lamar Jackson, isn't it like the way I see this slate with the 6 quarterbacks? I feel like there's only 2 that have a high concentration of targets to basically 2 guys, maybe arguably 3, but certainly not 4 or 5. Yep. And it's Dak Prescott with basically CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. And it's Jared Goff now that Sam Laporta is out, which I think is hobbling this offense a little bit, mind you. But you're going to get Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, maybe a little to Jameson Williams. So when we're talking about concentration of targets and stacking, doesn't it make sense? And again, I understand this might be where some of the community is going as a result of this. I'm not trying to break news here, but I'm just trying to level set what's going on with this slate. Doesn't it make sense that Dak and Goff would be the most obvious natural stacks because of the dance partners?
Yeah, I think the dance partners really matter quite a bit there. As far as, where I think it goes, I still think that Mahomes ultimately gets, the majority of the ownership still. And some of that is just game environment, his rushing upside. But yeah, I think that Dak is Dak is probably the most clear-cut, straightforward, with Goff second right behind it.
Okay. There's Meg, I want to ask you about the Cincinnati pass catchers that you said you like, and you might want to include Chase Brown. And when you say pass catcher, you could probably include the running back there. But real quick, Laura Mayer says Purdy or Love PPR. So this is Fantasy Football Today DFS, but I have to comment on that because Purdy's at Cleveland and there's going to be weather, and Purdy looked pretty awful. And even if he didn't look awful, I wouldn't play a quarterback going into Cleveland with weather. So I don't like Jordan Love. I don't think he's been very good or really had to be good since maybe week 8. But with that said, I think you have to play Jordan Love. And then Jacob, you said really quick, would you trade Emmanuel Wilson now? Well, what are you getting for Emmanuel Wilson now that Josh Jacobs is healthy? So, I feel like that would have been a question to ask last week with Josh Jacobs maybe coming back, but you scored with Emmanuel Wilson last week. I just don't know how much you're going to get for him, to be honest with you. All right, let's go to the pass catchers. Meg, talk to me about Jamar Chase at 8K, whether you're playing Yoshi Voss at 4,300. I think Mitchell Tinsley is interesting because I just think he's super talented. He like point of catch, like he contested catches. He's really, really good at 3,500 without T. Higgins on the field. I could see him maybe getting a few catches. I think he had 6 targets, only 2 receptions last week. And then, of course, Mike Gesicki at 3,100, Noah Fant at 3K. What do you like, Meg?
Yeah, so you kind of talked about it with Gesicki, and I'm kind of using him as one of the main stacking partners without Higgins. We've seen this last year when Higgins missed time, and I believe anytime that anybody last week with Chase missing time, Gesicki got a decent share of targets. So when one of them is out, Gesicki, he basically is their slot receiver. He is basically their slot receiver in the tight end position. So obviously, I love Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase. Historically, against the Ravens, we know that they have put up some massive ceiling games. And I understand we all have a lot of fear about what version of Burrow we're going to get coming off the injury and some rust potentially. But he is, I want to say, like 8 or 10% less owned than Lamar. And, he's definitely a lot less owned than Mahomes. So you're making a big stand there. And it's not like a massive ownership. It's not like he's going to be 5% owned, but if he's going to be like 14 or 15% owned, I think that's pretty interesting on this slate when historically he's gone crazy against this Ravens defense. Now, I know I've heard a lot of people in the industry, well, the Ravens defense is looking so much better. They are, but they haven't played murderer's row the last 4 weeks. They've played the Jets, the Browns, JJ McCarthy, Wolf, and I forget the one before that, but we're talking like the last 4, and Tua and the Dolphins. That's what it was on Thursday night. So the last 4 games, yeah, they can look good, but it's not like if we get any version close to the Joe Burrow that we know, that's nothing. And the Ravens haven't faced anything like that. So I'm willing to take the risk that Joe Burrow is, not a rusty Joe Burrow, and is the Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase that has had some nuclear games against ceiling games against the Ravens. And so I really like that approach, but I like adding in a third piece, at least Gesicki or Chase Brown, and as like the second receiver, even though they're at the running back and tight end position. I don't know that you make a great point about the other tertiary receivers. I don't know that I'll get there because I am kind of making a big stand on Gesicki and or Chase Brown with that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase stack.
Mike, talk to me about this Bengals side.
It's difficult. Chase could be there with great volume. I just think there's so much unknown with Burrow and how everything looks. Not having T. Higgins is certainly going to hurt as well. I don't know that I'm going to be like full fade, but if Jamar Chase is as popular as I'm projecting, I will probably be under owned. Knowing full well that he has the ability to beat me. Like if Jamar Chase goes out, like Jamar Chase, he's got 200-yard upside in this game. Because he might get fed 15 targets. I don't know. It's not comfortable. I'm not going to full fade, but I'm going to be underweight to where the field is. As far as, Tinsley, Yoshivas, Gesicki, like, yes, they're all playable. I'd make a lot of money if I told you I knew which one was going to be the beneficiary and get all the targets or land in the end zone. The truth is I have no idea. So I'm going to be a little underweight the situation, hope that it all gets spread out and is not concentrated on one particular value piece, and really kind of hope that Derrick Henry is able to run all over them and this game is in and out quick and not 45 dropbacks for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're right, Meg, about Derrick Henry, and we're about to get to our cheat sheets and our top three at each position, which I think will do a good job of streamlining what all these thoughts are on these three games. But if we're right about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, that he's not going to run, but Derrick Henry is going to be doing a lot of running, we're talking about chewing the clock and potentially, keeping Joe Burrow and company off the field a little bit. So, I mean, I feel like with all the other games we like, that there is the possibility you could just play Derrick Henry in that game and get out, right?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. There's definitely scenarios where that is the play, or like you said, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews. But yeah, my big stand on this slate is I am leaning into that, and I am fully admitting that I could get burned by trying to, be early to the Burrow chase and then the history that they have against the Ravens defense.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's get to our cheat sheets. We do want to get this show, it's Thanksgiving, right? So we want to make sure you guys have time with your family and all that. We don't want to make this a 60-minute episode. So we're going to get right to our cheat sheets and our top three at each position and a couple of closing thoughts. Meg, talk to me about your favorite stack, chalk buy, chalk fade, and contrarian and value play. Before you do, though, for those of you that are watching us on Fantasy Football Today, but not yet subscribed to the Fantasy Football Today DFS podcast, make sure you do that on Spotify and or Apple Podcasts. Again, Fantasy Football Today DFS. Make sure you're subscribed and get into our $5 Thanksgiving slate contest. It's only 150 people in there, so make sure you get a spot earlier rather than later. All right, Meg, cheat sheet.
You got it. Just talked about it. So I'm going to hope that we see the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase show against this Ravens defense, adding in Mike Gesicki in my favorite stack. Chalk buy will be Derrick Henry in that same game. And then the chalk fade is going to be in that same game. And Mike talked about too, looks like Zay Flowers will be pretty high owned. And I'm thinking the touchdowns for the Ravens are going to go through Henry and the tight ends. At least that's how I'm playing it. Contrarian play for me is Jake Ferguson. Now I have a lot of tight ends I'm mentioning here. I am going to be willing to do some 2 tight end builds.
Yeah,
let me say that. So I have 3 tight ends listed though on my cheat sheet. So contrarian of Jake Ferguson will most likely be in either Patrick Mahomes stacks as a bring back or in Dak Prescott stacks, because I'm seeing Jake Ferguson coming in around 8% owned. That's very low on this slate. He definitely has a 2 touchdown, game in his bag, even with Lamb back. So I like that as a contrarian play. But it will most likely be, again, telling those stories when I'm playing either Mahomes or Dak Prescott. Value play is Mark Andrews, just too cheap for his matchup against this Bengals defense that has just absolutely been the funnel you want to target against tight ends.
Absolutely. We'll talk about Isaiah Likely in a second. But first, Lamar Kenny says, my mom plays DFS and she loves the show. Shout out Beth. Beth, thank you for listening and watching the show, and good luck on DFS this week. Here's my cheat sheet. I've got Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce. I got to be honest with you. I mean, I have 3 stacks that I like. This is one of them. The Dak stack I like with both receivers, but I'm going to defer to CeeDee Lamb over George Pickens if I have to. And then I like Goff stacks. So I'm just throwing that out there. I put Mahomes and Travis Kelce here, but I like all 3 of those stacks very, very much. Jahmyr Gibbs is my chalk buy. No, I'm not breaking news there. My chalk fade is definitely going to be Javonte Williams. I like the passing game for the Cowboys, especially when you consider the matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs. Not that the pass defense is terrible, but that rush defense, I think, is going to limit Javonte, who has been kind of wearing down from an efficiency standpoint. Contrarian play is going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm going to play some golf stacks with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I'm going to try to do those with maybe Jahmyr Gibbs as well, and hope that we get one of those Detroit Lions games where they just go off at home, which we know Goff can go off at home. That's some nice wordplay that I should have thought of earlier, because I probably could have made that into something clever. My value play is going to be Isaiah Likely. You could go Mark Andrews there. I just like Isaiah Likely's price. I also will probably play some 2 tight end lineups. Mike Gesicki might be in there. Certainly Travis Kelce will be in there as well. Mike, top 3 at each position, and we start at the quarterback.
Yes, and keep in mind this is all about the pricing this week. You can, again, essentially play whoever you want. So this top 3 at each position looks a little crazy, but how about the top 3 quarterbacks? Patrick Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Lamar Jackson. I'm going to play all 3 of them. I like them all quite a bit. Mahomes would be my favorite, playing the same exact stacks with Dak, just swapping in and out both of them. So more game stack than team stack on both of those. Running back, again, The top two, Derrick Henry, Jahmyr Gibbs, going to play both of them. You can play both of them extremely, extremely easily. Javonte Williams going to be listed number 3 for me. Just that's where I think I'll be in terms of my overall exposure. If I'm going way, way down, I am going to play a little bit of David Montgomery at 4,800. Wide receivers, again, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens, going to play them both. They're both too cheap. Like them quite a bit. My third might surprise you a little bit, though. I like Xavier Worthy in this one. Going to show off the speed a little bit in this matchup against Dallas. I think that he's quietly going to get some more targets again. He had up to 8 last week. I think that that's kind of going to be his baseline, which is too cheap for his price point. And then the tight ends, look, Baltimore's tight ends are both way too cheap. Like them both. Isaiah Likely at 2,600, one of the better low price point plays on the slate. And then Travis Kelce, I think the volume will be there. I think he's still a threat in the red zone. Mind you, he had a rushing touchdown last week that was called back on an offensive holding penalty. But very much involved in that red zone still. So give me Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Travis Kelce.
So running the sim, says Brandon Bowser, Jacobs comes up a lot. Do you think there's a chance he gets hurt and nerfed early? I think we should probably close with that question. Maybe a closing thought from each of you in terms of just how to play the Thanksgiving slate. But the reason I wanted to read this question is because, and you all can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not looking at ownership this second, but I feel like nobody's going to play Josh Jacobs. I don't literally mean nobody. I just mean relative to the 3 or 4 running backs that we talked about a lot. If he was ready on Sunday, but they just wanted to hold him out because, they thought they were going to win and they just, give him a few extra days of rest, he could get a full role. And against the Lions, we've seen the Lions actually get exposed a little bit. We even saw Tyrone Tracy kind of running all over them and catching some balls against them. I feel like Jacobs is the type of guy that you could play and really take advantage of this slate because of Emmanuel Wilson, and people aren't sure if he's going to be healthy. I'm not saying he's going to have a great game, but if nobody's going to talk about a guy that typically gets a ton of carries and maybe a couple of catches, Meg, it makes sense to at least consider Josh Jacobs in a couple of your lineups.
Jacobs is definitely in my pool. He is behind Gibbs, Henry, Chase Brown, but he is definitely in my pool. I am a little nervous about what workload he will get, but to your point, that's why he is going to be the lowest owned of those 4 running backs too. So similar to how my stand on Burrow. Yeah. If you're going to get a lower owned discount on a very talented player, there's a reason for that. So you're taking a risk, but the risk could be, worth the reward. So, Jacobs is definitely in my pool for that reason.
Mike, final thought on the show, final thought on the Thanksgiving slate for people who are maybe they don't typically play the 3-game or a shorter slate, maybe 2 or 3 games, maybe some advice there in terms of being a little different than you would play on a full 10 or 11 game slate.
Don't be afraid to lean into a game you like. As Meg says, make sure some of the lineups are at least telling some sort of a story that you can actually believe. And don't be afraid to play a defense against, your position players against the defense. You don't have to go full on quarterback against defense, but position player against defense, I think is totally fine. I mean, the most obvious example of that one would be the Baltimore Ravens defense and Jamar Chase at wide receiver. There's on paper a negative correlation that completely irrelevant on a slate like this. So that, and don't be afraid to leave a little bit of salary out there. All right. And don't be afraid to leave a review on Fantasy Football Today DFS after you have subscribed on Apple or Spotify and get into our $5 contest. We're going to be doing our regular show for the main slate, but that's going to be on Friday. So look out for that again. Wherever you get your podcast, you can see Fantasy Football Today or listen to Fantasy Football Today DFS. Have a great Thanksgiving, notwithstanding whether you have green screens for DFS or not. But certainly we hope you have green screens, but we hope you have a great Thanksgiving, whether you're around family or whoever. Make sure it's a great day. And thanks for watching our show. Thanks for listening. And you'll hear from us on Friday for the main slate. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.